The triumph that wasn't.
We thought we were going to die for a little while.
We're there as passengers finally disembark early this morning. Stranded for days. Garbage and toilets backed up. Forced to sleep in tents on the poop deck.
5 days of one flush.
No electricity, no air conditioning, and not enough answers.
Clearly, we failed.
So tonight, we try to ask the tough questions.
I wonder if you could take a few more questions, like, do you really?
What keeps happening on these ships, and who should pay? High and dry. Plus, the Costa Concordia, a year later, still dead in the water, while victims try to rebuild their lives and recover their loved ones still missing.
You just can't take a pill and get over it.
And whatever happened to the so-called chicken of the sea? The captain who went MIA when the lights went out.
There were no women and children first. Ladies, you're on your own.
Ghost ship and cruise ship confidential. What's really going on in the cabin next door? What do staff insiders say?
All the action is below the waterline. The average crew deck makes a sorority house look like a nunnery.
The secret underground of sex and liquor below deck.
If there's an empty cabin, that'll be the cabin where everybody goes to have sex.
What happens when you're trapped by rough seas, rough passengers, and even rougher germs? Troubled waters. Here now, David Muir.
Good evening. And so many families, so many couples just getting home tonight after days trapped at sea on that Carnival cruise ship Triumph. The real triumph, though, those passengers simply getting through it all. The so-called cruise from hell finally docking in Alabama. 5 days after a terrifying engine fire knocked out power and turned that ship into what some called a floating petri dish. There was suffering, fortunately not the casualties of last year's Costa Concordia, but all of it does raise serious questions. And so tonight here, we put a microscope on the industry as a whole. Why was an ultimate rescue so late in coming? And were the apologies too little, too late? Matt Gutman, on this from the start, was on that dock getting answers.
The thousands of stranded passengers knew their ordeal was finally over. And this morning, they came pouring out of the crippled ship. It was an untriumphant return.
We get to go home.
Standing on and in some cases kissing terra firma for the first time in 8 days.
You can talk to us. Come on over.
I'm speechless. It's just really great to finally be back in America and on land.
Some angry.
The doctor on the staff can, excuse my French, he can kiss my.
It was the worst experience I've ever had. We thought we were going to die for a little while.
Others relieved.
I'm just happy to be alive. It's quite an ordeal, but we're here.
They ran, many wearing bathrobes against the cold, to plant kisses on loved ones, holding on to each other. By the hundreds, they were stuffed onto buses before they could even shower or even change their gritty clothes. Among the first out, Stephanie Stevenson and Rob Mallum. Not just your regular cruisers, they were headed for the tropics for a reason, a romantic wedding at sea. He's in a tie, she's in white. But marital bliss would turn into maritime nightmare early on Sunday morning, 3 days into the cruise.
Looked over the side rail, and you could see the just billows and billows of smoke coming out of the top of the stack.
Were you scared?
Yeah, I was pretty freaked out.
A fire had erupted in the engine room, and some passengers go into Titanic mode.
They said Alpha Team.
Attention, code Alpha, engine room.
People take it upon themselves to strap on life jackets and scramble towards the lifeboats.
I saw the smoke. I knew good and well there was a good chance the ship would be sinking.
The fire had burned out the ship's main engines. The sparkling city on the sea, known as the fun ship you see in these carnival ads, was now not much more than a 100,000-ton cork bobbing in the Gulf of Mexico. The electricity cuts out. Everything goes dark. Carly Jackson and Jody Adelhauser are jazzercise instructors from Paris, Texas.
All of the power shut off at like once, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like Titanic.
The lower decks fill with smoke, engulfing some of the cafeterias. They even see it billowing from the stack.
The smoke has gotten worse.
Then the air conditioning goes out. Still, the crew assures the passengers that everything is under control.
Nothing to worry about, folks. You can wait up on the Lido deck. It's really lovely out there.
An automated system extinguishes the fire, but the ship stays dead in the water. By Monday, 24 hours after the crisis began, Carnival decided to tow the ship not to nearby Mexico, but to Mobile, Alabama, because not everybody had passports with them. That added nearly 350 miles and an extra day of hardship for passengers.
I'm not liking that.
By this time, 2 other Carnival cruise ships had been diverted to deliver food and water to the hobbled vessel. Helicopters were also deployed carrying generators and other supplies on Wednesday.
They came in, dropped off water and stuff, but that didn't stop babies from going hungry. That didn't stop other people from hoarding food.
Wow. But despite their efforts, conditions aboard the Triumph were deteriorating fast. No electricity, not enough running water, and almost no cell phone service, leaving parents and loved ones on land frantic.
I just need to know that she's okay.
The ship, 300 yards long, equipped with every amenity, and now the more than 4,000 aboard could only communicate in snippets of text messages.
We're in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico.
36 hours into the crisis, no hot food, no hot water, no AC, and the ship was listing.
When we were leaning one way, it was kind of a little nerve-wracking.
Worst of all, backed up toilets. There was sewage everywhere.
We got one flush, one time.
5 days, one flush.
5 days, one flush.
For toilets, the ship handed out these red bags.
People were using the restroom in little red plastic bags and throwing them out into the hallway.
We were in shock. We were like, I'm not using a red bag.
So the thing is you just don't eat. You just don't eat.
To not have to use the red bag,
Controlling the colon. You just don't eat.
We met a couple that we were talking to that said her husband was laying in bed and just the ceiling fell down on him full of
urine, feces, all of that.
Yeah.
The stench and heat driving people to camp out on the decks. They built tent cities out of bed sheets.
We've been shipwrecked for, I guess, 3 days now.
ABC News was the first to fly out over the ship on Wednesday. You can tell how powerful the wind is, gusting at 25 miles an hour. Those conditions bringing out the worst in some people.
They opened the bar one evening and gave away free drinks, and that was a really bad idea. There were people throwing things over the side of the ship, acting unruly.
And during the voyage, passengers did receive updates on the PA system as well as printed status updates, but Rob Mallon thinks that was another poor decision.
Somehow they managed to print us out little letters that they sent to our room.
Maybe they were using the emergency generator to supply printers instead of toilets.
Yes.
Folks hoarding food, forcing others onto a diet of onion sandwiches.
What was the food situation like?
You had to stand in line for 3 hours to get a meal. And the first couple days it was the onion sandwiches.
But at least they were steadily, if slowly, being tugged back to the U.S. That's when Mike Padilla finally got through to his wife on the phone, anxiously waiting her return.
They think the tug line might have just broken.
Passengers say this should never have happened. Just last week, Carnival admitted that there was an electrical problem on the Triumph's previous voyage, but said there is no evidence at this time of any relationship between this previous issue and the fire that occurred on February 10th. This is the latest in a string of incidents involving cruise ships. Last year, the Costa Concordia capsized in Italy, killing 32 passengers. And in 2010, another Carnival ship, the Splendor, was stranded for days after another engine fire. Unlike the airline industry, there's no agency regulating the safety operations of cruise lines. Jim Walker is a maritime lawyer.
And unlike our U.S. aviation, commercial aviation fleet in the States that has the FAA that can oversee the industry and actually shut a fleet down if there's safety violations, there's no one looking out for the safety of passengers on ships relative to fires.
A spokesman for the cruise industry denies there's no regulation. I know you can't talk to me, but is there anybody who can? For 3 days, not a single Carnival exec appeared publicly until CEO Jerry Cahill spoke late Tuesday.
We pride ourselves in providing our guests with a great vacation experience, and clearly we failed in this particular case.
Carnival has offered the passengers a full refund, a voucher for another cruise, and $500, and it will cover travel expenses.
Oh my God, it's degrading, demoralizing. And then they want to insult us by giving us $500.
Since Sunday, ABC News has been requesting answers to questions about the ship's history of mechanical problems. No answer. They did hold 3 press conferences, but answered very few questions.
I'm sorry, Mr. Thornton. Matt Gutman from ABC News. Thank you for taking the time today. But I wonder if you could take a few more questions. Like, do you really? You're running away.
We've been trying to track down anybody from Carnival to talk to us. And the company's chief marketing officer, he also retreated.
We're on our way. 2 minutes.
But one thing that did go right in the end for Carnival was bringing that colossus of a ship up this narrow channel in darkness. And after 8 days at sea, the most precious of cargo delivered back to family members.
You guys gonna sleep tonight?
I'm gonna shower.
We're showering. We had our food, now just a long shower, long hot shower.
I really want to get home though.
And for the newlyweds, a delayed wedding banquet of burgers and fries.
This is going to be the best hamburger ever.
Never was there a couple so happy to trade a cruise for a bus.
When we got on the bus, we went back and we flushed the toilet just to make sure it worked.
And 2 other notes tonight. It's your tax dollars that help pay the price of these rescues by the Coast Guard, leading some to ask tonight, should the cruise lines be paying more? And as for size, the Carnival Corporation owns nearly half the industry, 10 brands, 100 ships worldwide. The industry is still growing. ABC's own parent company, Disney, has 4 ships of its own. We'll be right back.
Next, the Costa Concordia, more than a year later, still stuck on its side. The images we can't forget, and survivors still reliving the nightmare.
I haven't slept one good night since.
My girls have had nightmares.
And what about the captain who abandoned ship?
We have children, we have babies, and he's the first person off the ship.
But get this, he's suing to get his old job back. Coming up.
This nightmare for Carnival passengers comes just over a year since the Costa Concordia became the largest passenger ship ever to capsize. That accident, of course, turning deadly. Some 4,200 people on board rescued in those waters. Tonight here, we're back on the scene. Why is the ship still lying on its side all these months later? And have we learned anything to make passengers safer? Dan Harris went back to Italy to find out.
It was one of the largest, costliest, and arguably most infamous cruise ship disasters since the Titanic.
Get the kids, go.
The Costa Concordia, a 15-story luxury liner which ran aground off the coast of Italy on Friday the 13th of January 2012, killing 32 people. But in the last 13 months, as the story has faded from the headlines, what has happened to the man they called Captain Coward, blamed for causing the crash and abandoning ship? To the passengers who barely escaped? And what about the massive ship itself? We took a journey to find out. On a ferry off the coast of Tuscany, an hour into our voyage, it came looming into sight.
That is extraordinary.
A 60,000-ton behemoth beached in pristine, environmentally sensitive waters.
More than a year after the Costa Concordia went down, here it is. It's still here, surrounded by cranes and other vessels, which are involved in an extraordinary, expensive, risky, and unprecedented salvage operation. The plan is deceptively simple: to turn this hulking mass of steel upright and simply float it away.
It is an audacious plan. They are welding a series of enormous buoyancy tanks to one side of the boat, which will be used to rotate it upright. It will land, they hope, on an enormous steel bed and then be floated to the surface and towed away to a scrapyard. It could cost more than $500 million, and it might not even work. It is a far cry from the ship's heyday. Before she was rusting and rotting, she was a glittery showpiece with more than 18 restaurants and bars. Her captain, a made-for-TV villain named Francesco Schettino, who favors dark suits, sunglasses, and slicked-back hair, and who, in the dark of night, 3 hours into a 10-day cruise, decided to attempt a risky maneuver, taking the ship off course to give a sail-by salute to honor a fellow captain who lived on the tiny island of Giglio. but the ship came too close and hit an underwater rock. For an hour, as panic set in, the crew told the 3,200 passengers to return to their cabins, that it was just a minor technical problem. By the time Captain Scatino got around to issuing the abandoned ship order, the vessel was in chaos, with people pushing one another to get onto the lifeboats, and some of them jumping to their deaths. Lynn Kalin from Seattle documented the confusion.
Because we were literally in pitch black on this huge ship, and no one had any directions whatsoever. It was total chaos.
Members of the Ananias family from California were among the last off the ship.
We knew that this was the end for us.
We told our daughters that go ahead, our life,
Save yourself.
save yourselves. And they told us no, we go as a family.
Meanwhile, Captain Scatino was long gone. He later said he tripped and fell into a lifeboat. A Coast Guard official was recorded screaming at the captain to go back and help. Damn it, he said, go back on board. There were heroes that night, including the people of Giglio Island.
On that terrible night, many of the passengers and crew jumped into these frigid waters and swam over to these rocks, where they were tended to by complete strangers who live in this little port village.
The mayor, Sergio Ortelli, made an extraordinary decision.
You ordered people to open up their homes and businesses to the survivors. Why did you do that?
Some of them were soaking wet and frightened. Many of them were elderly, he said, and many of them children. Giuseppe Modesti still cries when he recalls the night when the town opened its arms to the wet and the wounded.
It's tough for you to talk about, emotional.
My mind goes back to that night, he said, and the emotions from those days return. In the immediate aftermath, the island was flooded with family members like Kevin Rebello, who we met as he was looking for his brother Russell, a waiter on the Concordia.
My instinct says he's somewhere around. I hope he's alive.
4 weeks ago, Giglio once again hosted survivors and victims' family members for the one-year anniversary. Kevin Rebello was there, his brother still missing and now counted as one of the dead.
For us, it's very important to have a body to take him home. For me and for my family, it's very important.
There was a procession and later a minute of silence at the exact moment, 9:45 p.m., when the Concordia ran aground. 32 lanterns carrying messages for those who did not survive.
There's still a lot of not understanding why we survived and other people didn't. And that is something that's very, very hard to live with.
This week, we caught up again with Lynn Kalin, who captured those haunting images from the Costa Concordia. She says watching this latest cruise ship crisis unfold in the Gulf brings it all back for her.
It brings back the memories of the night when we literally went over on the cruise ship. I feel so sorry for those people because I know what it's like being stuck on a cruise ship and not being able to get off.
One of the major ongoing frustrations for the survivors, lawsuits against Carnival Cruise Lines, which owns the Costa Concordia, are unlikely to go far. Maritime law is not generous to victims of disasters. The most you can probably collect for wrongful death or severe injury, roughly 60 grand. Lynn Kalin collected just over $9,000.
It definitely doesn't cover the stress in our going to psychiatrists and things like that and all of our belongings on the ship. And we're still living with it.
I haven't slept one good night since the accident.
My girls have had nightmares. One of them is saying that she's at an angle, like at a tilt, constantly in the dream.
So what has become of the man who is allegedly to blame for this accident? Captain Scatino is at his home near Naples under court orders. Since the crash, he's been publicly defending his actions.
Lei non crede di aver commesso un crimine?
Assolutamente no. Calling himself a hero, blaming his subordinates, and saying he has no regrets.
Io rifarei quello che ho fatto, visto?
And here's the kicker. He is now suing the cruise company to get his job back.
Io ho fiducia in tutte le persone che stai guidando questo caso.
Lei si sentirebbe ritornare su una crociera, comandante?
Certamente sì.
That comment drives Lynn Kalin up a wall.
I don't understand how someone that has done what he has done could even consider him working for the industry ever again.
Get the kids, go, go.
He didn't know what was going on with us. We have children, you have babies, and he's the first person off the ship. Where was his compassion for us?
In weeks, a judge is expected to announce whether there's enough evidence to indict Scatino on manslaughter, causing a wreck, and abandoning ship. The man they call the Chicken of the Sea may be looking at life behind bars. Meanwhile, after a series of delays, salvage crews hope to be able to remove the Costa Concordia from her watery resting place this September. For those whose family members died, however, the losses will remain incalculable.
In the months after the Costa Concordia disaster, the cruise industry facing a huge image problem. New bookings dropped, cancellations skyrocketed, and Carnival and other cruise line operators had to cut their rates to attract new passengers. Many asking tonight, will the same thing happen now after the Triumph? We'll be right back.
Next, when going overboard with your partying turns into overboard, period.
How in the hell did I get here?
Falling 10 stories into the pitch black and left behind in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico when 2020 continues. "2020 returns. Man Overboard, now with John Quinones.
No! There's a man overboard.
Straight ahead! Straight ahead! He's showing straight ahead.
As a rescue boat searches the dark sea.
He's way out there. You can hear him.
Moments later,
he's laying right there.
A man, after floating for 3 hours, is pulled from the water alive. They're more than just cruise ships. They're floating cities. But no one fears falling off a city. The same can't be said for these colossal vessels. The numbers are foggy, but some estimate that every 2 weeks someone goes overboard. 23 known cases last year. Most simply vanished. Only one was found dead, and 4 lived to tell their story. Passengers like Tim Sears.
Last thing I remember is looking for my friend in the casino.
It's 2003, aboard Carnival's Celebration cruise ship. As in many of these cases, Tim Sears, then 31, had too much to drink. That's the last detail he remembers before falling 10 stories into the Gulf of Mexico, 50 miles offshore.
I'm coming to in the middle of the water, and there's no ship around, and it's total darkness.
Pitch black in the middle of the ocean. Tim asks himself,
how in the hell did I get here? I mean, to be honest with you, that was my very first thought, was how in the world did I end up here in the middle of the water with no ship around?
He can see next to nothing.
A few varying lights way off in the distance, and that's about it. Fairly quickly, I realized I didn't have any pants, any shoes. All I had on was boxers and a sweatshirt and a t-shirt on.
No one knows Tim is missing, but he's not alone.
I can actually remember looking around and seeing just little green, bluish, small creatures jump around, and that's all I could see for miles. And I just remember stopping and actually going, wow, this is amazing.
Tim's psychedelic friends are just bioluminescent algae. For 14 hours in shark-infested waters, Tim, a former Army paratrooper, manages to stay afloat until his mind and body say enough.
I was tired, and so I made peace with God and closed my eyes and started going down in the water, taking water in through my nose into my lungs, and no thoughts went through my head. I was ready for it to be over.
Tim says he starts to sink into the darkness, but then something happens, a light of hope that gives him a renewed determination.
And my eyes just opened, and I swam back to the top, spit the water out, and decided that I was going to keep swimming.
For 3 hours, Tim struggles on. Like Tom Hanks in Castaway, he's still slowly drifting into the abyss until, in a scene straight from the movie, Tim, too, sees what he thinks is a ship on the horizon.
The waves were just enormous. Up and down. I had lost my glasses, of course. I couldn't see.
With every primal instinct to survive, Tim swims toward the boat, screaming for help. After 17 hours, a cargo ship headed for Texas plucks him out of the water.
I was asking God to send me any ship, and here any ship had rescued me. And it brought me to tears.
Cruising is very safe. It's highly unusual for a passenger to just fall overboard.
Statistically, cruising is safer than walking across the street.
That seems like it's pretty good odds, but it's not to the families that are left without their loved one.
13 years ago, Gene Scavone's son, Jimmy, was lost at sea on a Carnival cruise in the Caribbean. Since then, she's been linking families that have lost loved ones.
It's like a family, a group of us now that have this experience, and we have no answers. No one should vanish from a cruise ship. No one should leave on a vacation on a cruise ship and never come back.
There have been well-known cases of the vanished. In 2005, George Smith, the honeymooner who disappeared on a cruise, leaving behind a pool of dried blood. His family's convinced he was murdered. His body never found. Other stories of suspected foul play have received fewer headlines. Annette Meisner went on a cruise to Mexico with her parents and daughter. One evening, they discovered she was missing. The ship's crew paged her name.
When we heard that page, I knew something was wrong. My heart just fell. I panicked.
On the ship's third deck, their daughter's purse and overturned drink were found next to the railing. The ship was searched from top to bottom, and eventually the Coast Guard was called in.
They covered 833 square miles, and they did not find the body.
Meisner's disappearance remains an unsolved mystery. Her family reached an out-of-court confidential settlement with Carnival Cruise Lines. But for her family, there will never be closure, only the bitter memory of what was lost at sea.
Very difficult. You go on vacation with 4 people and you come back with 3.
While there are happy endings like Tim Sears, the tragic tales continue to take victims. 3.5 years ago, Annette's father, Wally, died from what his wife called a broken heart.
Next, think you're having fun on a vacation cruise upstairs? Wait till you hear what the crew can get up to downstairs.
Is there a lot of partying that goes on even amongst the crew members?
Amongst the crew members, that's where the party is.
The crew spills the beans. Cruise Ship Confidential, coming up. As we continue, the secret life below deck. Here's Deborah Roberts.
For millions, cruises are about sunsets, swimming, soaking up the good life. But let's face it, for many, hitting the high seas is also about hitting the hard stuff. Ever hear the expression cruise ship drunk? Well, you're looking at it. YouTube is plastered with evidence of cruise passengers gone wild. Seems there's something about being at sea that brings out the crazy in people. You might even lose your fear of heights. And it's not just passengers partying it up. Beneath the pools, the bistros, the bars, down past the sun deck and through these doors is a world few cruisers ever see. Unless you turn to YouTube, where cruise ship employees have posted a clear glimpse of life below the deck. This man saw it all.
All the action is below the waterline, all of it.
Brian David Bruns worked as a waiter aboard cruise ships until 2005, dishing about his adventures in his 3 books.
Is there a lot of partying that goes on even amongst the crew members?
Amongst the crew members, that's where the party is. The amount of alcohol and sex that's going on down there, it's paramount. The average crew deck makes a sorority house look like a nunnery. I'm not kidding.
In It's plain to see on these crew videos, young people from all around the world spending months at sea, working and playing aboard these floating cities. There are regular crew parties, bars designated just for the staff.
It's a big free-for-all. That's all it is.
Sherry Cecil worked on a luxury cruise liner in 2004, climbing the ladder from waitress to officer.
There's sex cabins if there's an empty cabin, and they can somehow sneak a pass key. That'll be the cabin where everybody goes to have sex.
All of it happening, she says, under the passengers' noses. While cruisers stroll the luxurious decks and enjoy beautiful cabins, on the lower floors, often below the waterline, is the crew deck. It's like a separate ship with dining areas, rec rooms, and tiny cabins housing at least 2 to a room.
The cabin is the size of a walk-in closet.
And within this little society at sea, a strict hierarchy all its own.
Is it kind of a sense of like upstairs, downstairs, you know, sort of a feeling of you're working here, they're working there, and you don't mingle?
Yes, and it's not just a feeling, it's physical as well. Staff officers, all those guys are up on the bridge decks. They never go down below the waterline. They don't even go to the crew decks if they can help it.
Unless there's a reason.
A lot of my friends in the restaurants were pretty ladies. They always had an officer that was asking them to be their ship squeeze. That's what it's called, ship squeeze. We all have one, right? And they have wives and kids back home.
When the wives come on in the families, the mistresses are put offshore for a week's vacation, and the wives leave, and on the mistresses they come back.
But it's a tougher life for crew members who say days are filled with back-breaking chores.
You work constantly. I don't want to call it a sweatshop condition, but that's really what it is. So you work 80 hours a week minimum.
80 hours a week.
I worked 15 weeks in a row at 100 hours a week. They're paying you something like $40 a month. Almost 100% of their salary come from tips from the guests. Between $1,000, maybe $3,000 on the high end a month.
Human rights groups have accused cruise lines of exploiting workers with long hours and low pay. The cruise industry says it's a problem of the past and new laws will regulate working and rest hours. Yet former employee Cecil says passengers have been deliberately kept in the dark about anything negative.
We don't tell them anything. If there's a mechanical breakdown, we do not tell them. If there is an illness outbreak, we do not tell them. We are told to lie to them.
Sherry's personal cruise story is frightening. Just 2 months into her contract after a night of drinking, she says a fellow crew member raped her in her cabin. The trauma of the attack was horrifying enough, she says. Then she told her superiors.
And my boss hauled me into his office and said, "Sherry, bad things happen to good people. You just have to put this beside you. You're just going to have to get on with your life, get over it, and get back to work. So either you show up tonight at work or you go pack your bags." I had already been raped. Was I going to lose my career?
Sherry continued working. 2 years later, she left the ship, sued the cruise line, and settled for an undisclosed amount.
They shoot first, you know, ask questions later. If there's even a whiff of controversy, you're gone. You get pregnant, you're gone. They very much sweep it under the rug.
Still, Brian says the good outweighs the bad. He and others we talked with insist that cruise work is mostly free of serious trouble or controversy.
Would you take a cruise today?
Oh, yeah. I can't wait to take a cruise. Bring it. Bring it. I'm ready. Get
much of imagination with what you would expect here in the United States.
I don't think that's true anymore. There certainly may have been a time where cruise lines hired retired doctors or doctors that really didn't want to work very hard. I think those days are over.
Oliver DiPietro spent more than a decade as a cruise ship doctor, as well as managing medical care for Norwegian Cruise Lines. I spoke with him from his office in Miami.
Basically, you know, people spend a lot of time researching the ports of call and the onboard activities. Nobody's checking in to see who the doctors are.
Well, I think that the cruise lines do that before they hire a ship's doctor. Most doctors today are, doctors that have emergency room experience and training. Same with the nurses.
But no matter how qualified the doctors, if something happens like it did on the Triumph,
the smell, the sewage, coming out of the bathroom, the toilets wasn't flushing.
It's trouble.
It's their worst nightmare. It's actually an unbelievably significant event. You have no hygiene.
Urine floating on the floor, feces coming down the wall.
No running water.
This is the bags that we were told to use the restroom in.
They're not able to even clean up after themselves.
Dr. Philip Tierno of NYU is an expert on microbiology and germs and says confined spaces can always breed disease. Infectious disease outbreaks are not uncommon. The CDC reported 16 stomach flu outbreaks on U.S. ships alone just last year.
An outbreak of a highly contagious stomach virus on board the Queen Mary 2.
The bottom line, in a situation like the Triumph,
it was the worst experience I've ever had.
There are limits to what any doctor can do.
Ship's medical departments are very well equipped.
But it sounds like, I mean, you're basically there to stabilize the patient until you can get the more sophisticated medical help, right?
Correct. You would not do surgery on board. You would evacuate.
But getting to the hospital fast is only possible if you're close enough for a Coast Guard helicopter to reach, like a man with a life-threatening condition was just over a year ago. Of course, after you land, you may want pain medication when you get the bill, as much as tens of thousands of dollars for that Coast Guard flight. But a ship at sea presents all kinds of potential hazards, and being trapped on board, particularly in bad weather, can be much worse than no bathrooms. Imagine the terror on board the Oceanos. It went down off South Africa in 1991. Fortunately, everyone was rescued. 30-foot rogue waves hit this cruise ship near Spain in 2010, smashing through windows, a direct hit on unsuspecting diners. The terrifying wave killed 2 and left 14 others injured. And look what happened on this ship during a bad storm off New Zealand in 2008. Everything that wasn't nailed down slides around or out of control. 42 people were hurt, many with broken bones. In these worst-case scenarios, people's lives may depend on their own reactions. And researchers say most of us, 80% of us, will freeze.
The vast majority of people do this. It's called denial, in essence, right?
There's a lot going on in your brain in this moment. And most of all, your brain is going to rely on its hardwired response to fear.
Writer Amanda Ripley has studied our reactions to plane crashes, sinking ferries, and burning buildings.
I think the thing that's most surprising is that your biggest threat is that you will move too slowly or shut down altogether.
That is, until others step in to lead the way. About 10% of us will take that role. On the Concordia, those take-charge types led others to safety. As for the final 10%, they completely freak out and are far less likely to survive a disaster. Cruise ships have stepped up their safety precautions and evacuation drills to ensure people are aware of what to do.
We train them what they would do in an actual emergency. We practice in the way that they might actually be expected to act and the crew would act in an emergency.
Still, passengers seem relatively unfazed. The cruise lines are confident people will sail on, anticipating nothing but happy memories.
We want both new customers and old customers to know that as a guest on our ships, they will be safe and secure.
And that is our program for tonight. I'm David.
A beloved father and devoted basketball coach.
Jimmy loved kids.
He loved to talk about coaching basketball and God.
Ruthlessly gunned down in his own home.
There were 10 shell casings. Whoever did this wanted to make sure that he was dead.
Leaving a whole community devastated.
I just started screaming. I literally just lost it.
Detectives follow evidence down a twisted trail.
It was what we call a whodunit. All the doors were locked to some fashion.
There was muddy footprints coming into the foyer area.
To uncover a number of suspects.
He immediately lawyered up. He didn't want to talk about anything.
He had just filed for divorce before he was killed.
Was there some sort of romantic thing gone awry?
And unveil a killer no one could have ever imagined.
They had no remorse, no confessions.
You saying that you killed him?
It shocked me very, very much. This could happen to anybody.
Cordova is a peaceful suburb just east of Memphis, Tennessee. Its wide open spaces and strong church communities make it a haven for families.
Cordova is one of those very safe neighborhoods. Kids riding up and down to the bikes. You honk at your neighbor and your neighbor waves.
It's not a place that we're accustomed to seeing violent crimes.
But in the winter of 2013, the town's carefree spirit is disrupted by a troubled call to police.
The initial call came on a Friday morning from the principal at Ridgeway High School.
Jimmy McClain had not reported to work. He was a school teacher and a basketball coach.
Jimmy was always punctual, so when he didn't show up for work, people immediately started worrying about Jimmy.
Our patrol officers go over there and they knocked on the door, nothing. The front door was locked, the back door was locked, the garage door was shut, all the windows were locked, nothing appeared to be opened or broke. And then one officer was able to look in through some glass doors. And then he saw something that looked like a shell casing.
Immediately on alert, officers quickly force entry into the home.
As soon as they made entry, they saw a black male on the floor with a lot of blood around him, dead.
Homicide investigators are on the scene within minutes.
When I first arrived, we see a male victim laying in the den area of the house who appeared to have been shot multiple times.
Whoever did this wanted to make sure that he was dead.
Detectives find a wallet in the victim's pocket. The ID inside confirms this is 49-year-old Jimmy McClain.
The big thing that stood out at that time was the numerous shell casings that were scattered throughout the living portion of the residence.
There were 10 shell casings, and they were all the same caliber, 40 caliber, but they were two different brands. That puts a theory in your head. Was there two shooters, you know, one brand in one gun, one brand in the other? Or was it just one shooter with mixed rounds?
Detectives can find no murder weapon at the scene, but something else grabs their attention.
There was muddy footprints coming into the foyer area, which we knew were not any of our officers' prints.
We were able to lift those prints.
I truly was hoping we could identify the type of shoe and the actual size of the shoe.
There were no signs of fingerprints to the naked eye, so we were able to swab the doorknobs, both interior and exterior on the front door, for the presence of DNA.
An exhaustive search of the house yields no sign of forced entry.
We had no signs of robbery, no signs of burglary. The big thing to me was all the doors were locked to some fashion, meaning someone locked the door on their way out upon leaving the scene. That told me that most likely our suspect had a key to the residence.
So once we realized that somebody had let themselves in, we were like, well, who's got access to these keys? Did Jimmy know the person who did this?
Detectives also attempt to discover the approximate time the murder happened.
We were able to find out there was a shots fired call that came in our dispatch around 8:50 p.m. 2 days before we found the body.
So started making sense real quick, though, that that's probably when this happened.
As police continue their investigation at the scene, Jimmy's sister, Easter, arrives.
To this day, that is the absolute worst day of my life. It's the day I came around the corner and saw yellow tape around my baby brother's house, who I love so dearly. The police asked me, "Ma'am, do you know who lives here?" I said, "My brother is my brother. Where's my brother?"
Officers confirm Easter's worst fears and tell her that her brother has been killed.
I just started screaming, just started just howling.
Detectives ask Easter and Jimmy's mother, Jamela, to come downtown. Through her tears, Easter tells detectives how young Jimmy grew up to be such a beloved figure.
We grew up in eastern Arkansas. Jimmy is the fourth of 8 kids. He was intelligent, precocious, very athletic.
From a young age, Jimmy McClain had a passion for basketball.
Jimmy walked tall, slender, like a greyhound. He's real tight muscle, flexible, agile.
His nickname was Full Time because he never played half speed. He always played full speed, and that's how he took life.
Jimmy had played basketball with Scottie Pippen. Jimmy considered Scottie Pippen a friend, and I think it was likewise.
After 7 years of professional basketball, Jimmy took up coaching.
Jimmy loved teaching and mentoring. He just was a natural leader with youth.
Jimmy had found his calling, but one part of his life remained unfulfilled.
The thing that he talked to me the most about was his desire to be married.
In the late 1990s, Jimmy met the partner he'd always dreamed of. Her name was Carla.
He was very happy, very excited. He took his relationship very seriously. The next summer, they got married.
Jimmy also became a father to Carla's 2 children from a previous relationship, 16-year-old Tiffany and 11-year-old Dwayne.
He never had children, so he was looking forward to being a father. They all looked up to him as a mentor and as a father, and he spent a lot of time trying to be sure that they were on a good path. He talked to me a lot about the things he was going to do with Dwayne and Tiffany, and he especially wanted to involve Dwayne in summer basketball camps and so forth. He was very serious about being a good husband and a good father.
Together with Carla, Jimmy raised Dwayne and Tiffany as his own. But after 8 years of marriage, cracks started to show in their relationship.
Carla wanted the divorce at first. I do believe that the problems were related to something that occurred early on in their relationship.
Initially, Jimmy had resisted the idea.
I overheard Jimmy telling her that it doesn't make sense for us to be separated. There's nothing wrong, we're not having problems.
But eventually, Carla and Jimmy split up, and after 4 years of separation, Jimmy finally agreed to make it official.
I don't think I really got the full story about exactly what changed his mind and his heart toward her. But he had just filed for divorce a couple of weeks before he was killed.
Detectives are suspicious. Was the timing just a coincidence, or did Jimmy's looming divorce have something to do with his murder?
We immediately thought we need to talk to Carla.
Had Jimmy and Carla been in some sort of argument or confrontation?
Coming up, detectives unearth disturbing clues.
There had been a scandal at the high school.
Why are these numbers erased during the same time period as the homicide?
And the truth blindsides everyone.
We had found the needle in the haystack.
They had admitted to killing a basketball coach.
Police have just learned that Jimmy McClain filed for divorce 2 weeks before he was killed. And now detectives need to know if animosity between Jimmy and his soon-to-be ex-wife Carla could have been a motive for murder.
We had asked, Carla and Tiffany and Dwayne, her biological children, to come town.
Dwayne and Tiffany wait in the next room while police talk to Carla, starting with her relationship with Jimmy.
She says, look, we were going through a divorce, but it wasn't because he was doing anything bad. She said that we fell out of love.
Carla tells police that when she and Jimmy were married in 2001, Jimmy treated her kids, Dwayne and Tiffany, like they were his own. But as they grew into their late teens, Carla and Jimmy's parenting styles started to clash.
Carla did advise that Jimmy was really hard on her kids. Jimmy was very discipline-oriented, and she always took the side of the kids. In her eyes, they could do nothing wrong. She wasn't going to let Jimmy over-discipline. And some of the issues is what transformed into this growing away from each other.
Detectives ask Carla directly if she stands to gain from Jimmy's death.
She did advise that she had a life insurance policy through her work where Jimmy was on the policy and she would have been the beneficiary.
Was the life insurance payout a motive for Carla to kill Jimmy? Knowing evidence from the crime scene suggests the killer let themselves in. Detectives need to find out if Carla still had access to Jimmy's home.
We actually did ask Carla if she had a key to the house, and she did not have a key that she could remember.
Undeterred, they ask where Carla was on the night of the murder.
She didn't go out and do anything. She says it was raining that night. It was nasty weather. She actually went to her bedroom and read a book. We asked if anybody could verify that. She said, well, my son, Dwayne, because he was at home as well.
To confirm Carla's alibi, police bring in Dwayne and Tiffany, who are waiting in the next room.
When we saw Dwayne, he's a 19-year-old, kid. Dwayne gave a statement advising to us that, when his mom came home, that he just sat and chilled at the house. He didn't have a cell phone, so he would use his mom's. His mom said that she was down in his bedroom. He said he was up in his bedroom, and they didn't see each other the rest of the night.
Dwayne's account lines up with Carla's, but detectives are curious about whether Dwayne had any conflicts with Jimmy.
Tell me about Jimmy. How was y'all's relationship?
It was cool, but we bumped heads a little bit sometimes. He was straight up in the night. He was cool. He fun, loving person.
Dwayne just was like, I can't believe this happened. I don't know who would have done this.
Police turn their attention to his sister Tiffany, and right away sense some tension.
When we interviewed Tiffany, she admitted her and Jimmy butted heads on things, and she actually moved out. She didn't like being parented by him.
Detectives ask where she was at the time of the murder.
Advised she was at home with her boyfriend during the time frame all that Wednesday evening. So at the time we got through interviewing Carla, Tiffany, and Dwayne, there was not anything to lead us to believe that they had any involvement with the death of Jimmy.
To help confirm their alibis, detectives ask for Carla and Tiffany's cell phones.
We were going to use the technology of the cell phone pinging to corroborate where they were the night of the murder.
While they wait for those results, detectives canvass Jimmy's friends and colleagues to find out who else might have had a key to his house.
Early on in the investigation, we had to look at everything. With Jimmy being a high school teacher, with Jimmy being a basketball coach, there was multiple people that could have done this.
We had to start going back to who knew Jimmy. And the first thing we did was work. We spoke with all the teachers liked Jimmy, other coaches liked Jimmy, the principal liked Jimmy.
Detectives can find no one with a key or even a bad word to say about Jimmy.
He was the kindest, gentlest, most compassionate person that I know. But for somebody to snatch your loved one from you out of their own selfish reasons, it really is heartbreaking, and it makes you mad.
3 days into the investigation, Detectives receive Jimmy's cell phone back from forensics and discover that he was texting shortly before he was killed.
He was texting with a female subject, and they were back and forth talking about some directions and basically good night. The last text we identified as a subject named Pam Smith.
The name is new to police, but when they compare the time of her last text with the report of gunshots on the night of the murder, they realize they were just minutes apart. With this new lead, Pam Smith becomes detectives' newest suspect. Who is she? And was she involved in Jimmy's murder?
When you read the text messages between her and Jimmy, the lingering question had to be, was there some sort of, romantic thing gone awry?
Detectives have just discovered that Jimmy McClain was texting with a woman named Pam Smith on the night he was murdered.
We were able to determine that Pam was the last person that Jimmy had contacted.
Investigators need to speak to Pam to see if she has any information that points to the killer.
We called just to say, this is the sheriff's office. Do you know Jimmy? And she was like, yeah, that's my boyfriend.
Detectives inform Pam of Jimmy's murder and carefully gauge her response.
She was extremely distraught. She was like, do I need to come down there? What do I need to do? We still had to figure out who she was. Is she married? Is there an affair situation? Is this a boyfriend, girlfriend situation?
Pam tells detectives that she and Jimmy had only been dating for 6 months.
We were able to sort of dig into the relationship between Pam and Jimmy, what seemed like a healthy relationship.
Pamela claims she was 3 hours away in Nashville at the time of the murder, and she's more than happy to turn over her phone so police can verify her statement.
After talking to her, there was nothing that she gave any kind of suspicion or anything.
Detectives have one more question for Pamela.
We actually did ask Pam if she had a key to the house, and she advised that she did not have a key.
But she says she knows who does.
Pam had overheard a phone call. Jimmy was telling his wife, Carla, that she could come by the house while he was gone to pick up some mail that had come to the house for her. Pam took note that when they left the house, Jimmy didn't leave the mail in the mailbox or on the front door, but he left it inside the house, which told Pam that Carla had a key to the house.
Police believe the killer had a key, but Carla told detectives she didn't have one. The discrepancy raises a red flag.
Is it possible that Carla had a key to the house? How can we prove that she didn't come into the house the night of the murder?
There's only one way to know for sure.
We used the technology of the cell phone pinging to follow her from her work all the way to home.
The cell phone data indicates Carla was home all night, and her daughter Tiffany was too.
Everybody's statements made sense where they were. There was no reason to pursue any other questions with them or Pam at that moment.
Before Carla and Tiffany can be completely ruled out, police must corroborate the calls and texts on their phones with the complete records from the cell companies.
And those can take several days, depending on the circumstance.
A week after the murder, Jimmy's loved ones pay their respects at his funeral.
Jimmy's funeral was held at a local Church of Christ, probably a couple thousand people there. Jimmy touched a lot of people.
Going to Jimmy's funeral was a tough process for myself. So many people loved him.
The mystery of who could have killed Jimmy is on everyone's mind, and grief-stricken loved ones are desperate for answers.
The family was very concerned, but I felt that absolutely the truth would come out.
It was hard waiting and hoping that they get that person before it's too late.
It's very frustrating. After several days, it gets worse. It gets harder to solve, and the family starts to lose hope in you.
The day after the funeral, detectives received the forensics reports.
There was no extra DNA under the fingernails of him to see if he got physically close enough to maybe grab the suspect or anything like that. We didn't get any fingerprints that weren't supposed to be there. Jimmy's prints were the only ones there.
The report isn't all bad news for detectives.
An expert at Nike was able to determine the muddy shoe prints in the entryway of the house. Most likely came from a Nike Air Force One.
These are basketball-type shoes. They're between the size 10 and 11.
Before detectives can follow up on this new lead, their investigation takes a bizarre twist.
There had been a scandal at the high school.
Ridgeway High School had a very good basketball team. They were one of the top in the state. We started hearing about a student at the school who had just recently gotten in some trouble.
Detectives need to know if the scandal is linked to Jimmy's murder. Staff tells them the player at the center of the storm is number 22, Mackenzie Sewell.
Obviously, he was a fairly good basketball player, but he was also 2 years older than people that he was playing with. He was actually an adult, falsified documents to still play high school basketball because he was attempting to try to get a scholarship to play.
A week after Jimmy is found dead, the scandal explodes into the headlines.
This man used a fake transcript to enroll here at Ridgeway High, and our sources tell us the man has a GED, but enrolled here simply so he could play basketball.
A humiliated Mackenzie is kicked off the team and out of Ridgeway High.
The dream of the NBA is over. The coaches were like, oh my goodness, because the whole school gets punished for it. They get disqualified from being able to play.
The scandal raises a key question for detectives. Had Jimmy discovered the truth about Mackenzie and been silenced before he could report him to authorities?
Did Jimmy initiate this whole situation? Because we knew Jimmy was an ethical individual. If Mackenzie thought Jimmy had anything to do with this, then this could be a reason why Jimmy was murdered.
Police are eager to talk to Mackenzie, but that's not going to happen.
He immediately lawyered up. He didn't want to talk about anything.
Detectives try a different approach. They go to speak with the person who registered him at Ridgeway High, his mother, Chandra Nicole. What she tells them is more bizarre than they could have imagined.
What we found out is that was his wife.
Detectives hunting the killer of high school basketball coach Jimmy McClain are investigating whether a scandal involving one of his players is linked to his death. Now they discovered that the player's mother is actually his wife. She admits to helping Mackenzie falsify his age, but says it wasn't Jimmy who had discovered the deception.
She had actually called in to say that he was falsifying records, that he wasn't supposed to be in the school because they had gotten into an argument.
While enjoying his second go-around in high school, Mackenzie began a relationship with a fellow student. When his wife caught wind of it, she told the school about Mackenzie's scam.
It was a domestic situation between him and the wife. Really didn't have anything to do with Jimmy. Didn't follow Jimmy at all.
Once again, a promising lead evaporates into thin air. And over a week into the investigation, police are starting over.
I was back to square one again. I was starting to question myself and wonder, are we gonna get anywhere with this thing?
I was starting to be concerned. I wanted to know when people were going to be charged.
Just as investigators begin to fear the trail growing cold, they receive the complete cell phone records for Jimmy's ex-wife, Carla, and her daughter, Tiffany.
We had ordered direct cell phone records to corroborate the exact records that we had initially dumped. You're talking hundreds, even thousands of records at times to look through, to see if you can find where there's a discrepancy in something.
After days of hard work, police get the break they've been praying for.
Everybody else's phones were making sense, but Carla's phone did not make sense. We noticed there were actually people being texted between 6 and 9, 2 different phone numbers. And that was the time frame of the homicide. Those texts were conveniently erased off Carla's phone. So that automatically piqued interest. So we were trying to identify the 2 phone numbers that were deleted. We identified one of them as a subject named Robert, and then another subject named Heather. We looked up Robert real quick and found out Robert was a convicted felon for dope dealing. But why are these numbers erased the night of the murder? At that point, I felt it necessary to call Carla back in and talk to her again, and then further identify maybe Heather and Robert, since we had names on them.
When detectives press Carla about the texts, she tells them they belong to her son and Jimmy's former stepson, Dwayne. Detectives already know that Dwayne uses his mom's phone since he doesn't own one of his own.
Carla said that Heather was a girlfriend. She says, oh, she's a good girl. She's a girl that lives out in Cordova, not too far. Carla said wasn't too fond of Robert, but she did admit he and Dwayne were friends. She says, well, I don't really like him hanging out with Robert too much. You know, he's a troublemaker.
Knowing that Dwayne was texting with a known felon during the time frame of Jimmy's murder is a red flag for detectives. So they asked Dwayne to join his mom down at the station.
The way we approached Dwayne was like, hey, we're having to kind of start over and get a more detailed events of the night. And he advised when his mom got home, he had the phone, he spoke with one of his friends, and then Heather came over.
When detectives finish with Carla and Dwayne, they quickly contact Heather to see if she can confirm Dwayne's story.
She said, I went to Dwayne's house that evening, later that evening. So she has confirmed that she went over there.
It seems like it's another dead end. Yet when detectives follow up with a question about the basketball shoe print found at the crime scene, the interview takes a promising turn.
We asked about the shoes, and she said, oh, Dwayne has these Air Force Ones, and he wears a size 10.5, which fit the crime scene. And at that point, she said, and I remember seeing those Air Force Ones out on the porch, but I hadn't seen them since then. She said, I even have a picture of them. And when she showed a picture, it was a picture of Dwayne staying in the kitchen with a AR-15 rifle and these Air Force Ones.
Police quickly get a search warrant for Carla's home.
Searching the closets and everything else, so there's no Air Force Ones in there. There's no shoes that match the homicide. Took pictures of his room, and we left. We didn't come out at that house with anything.
So far, linking Dwayne to the crime has not proven fruitful, but detectives have another strategy.
We know for a fact that there was text messages between Robert and Dwayne during the homicide. We feel that those texts could be very important. Since he'd erased them off his phone, we couldn't get them. So my goal was to get a search warrant for Robert's phone, hoping that the text messages were still on his phone, visible where we could see them.
While police wait for a warrant to be approved, officers keep an eye on Robert.
I arrived, and within a few hours of setting up surveillance, Robert Collins came out of his house.
At that point, our detectives went to talk to him, and Robert took off running.
Detectives investigating the murder of Jimmy McClain believe text on the phone of convicted felon Robert Collins may point to the killer.
When Robert took off running, he ran a good ways, but we needed to catch him. We didn't want him to destroy his phone or anything like that.
As Robert Collins was running away from the scene, he tossed something.
Our detectives ended up catching him on foot, and when they did, he had a large amount of narcotics.
The illegal drugs give detectives reason to arrest Robert. But even more incriminating is what he tried to discard as he fled.
When we saw that he had tossed a weapon, we immediately thought maybe that was the weapon that was involved.
So in the back of my head, I'm thinking, oh, this is fantastic. Are we going to solve the homicide right now? You get excited, like, hey, we're there, we're going to get this.
Police bring Robert down to the station, but before they question him, they carefully examine his gun and phone.
I think it was very quickly determined it wasn't the weapon from the scene.
Still, detectives have plenty of leverage on Robert.
He's a felon convicted with a handgun. Now he's got another handgun on him and a large amount of drugs. This could easily go federal. Maybe that could help us out. Maybe he'd want to work something out. He wouldn't budge on anything. I don't want to talk to y'all. Basically, he said, just put me in a jail cell. I'll go do my time. You just don't get that. That's just not normal.
Is Robert trying to protect his buddy, Dwayne, or just himself? If he won't give anything up, detectives hope his cell phone might.
I was hoping that the text messages were still on his phone. Started going through it. Well, Robert had erased his text too. But what Robert didn't erase were some pictures that we were able to get. The day before the homicide, Robert on his phone had a picture of a handgun. It is a similar gun, a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson Sigma, the same caliber used. What was unique about the handgun was not the handgun itself, but where the handgun was laying. And it was laying on a very unique bedspread. When I saw the bedspread, I was like, I've seen that bedspread before. I said, go get the search warrant pictures from when we picked Dwayne up. Well, as we scrolled through more pictures, we finally found a deleted picture that had Dwayne in front of the bedspread. So it tied it all in with the gun in the picture.
Police now know the gun likely belonged to Dwayne or someone in his inner circle. But who used it to gun Jimmy down in cold blood? Detectives hope to find out from Robert himself.
So when we put Robert in jail, we were hoping Robert would say something on the phone. The first phone call that Robert made was to a young guy. First thing that Robert said to the guy was, hey man, that pit bull, it's real sick. And the guy kind of like, I don't think he caught what he was saying. He's like, oh yeah, just laughing, I got you. And Robert, you could see, was very frustrated. Like, no man, I'm not kidding. You need to get rid of that pit bull, it's sick. Bri shouldn't have sold it to you. We did have indication that pit bull was most likely the gun.
And real sick, put it in street terms, means it has a body on it.
Detectives traced the owner of the phone Robert called.
It was a kid named Jamarius that lived in the Cordova area.
We believe that Jamarius Cooper had in his possession the firearm that was used in the killing of Jimmy McClain.
Police get an emergency search warrant and race over to Jamarius's home before he can dispose of the gun.
When we got Jamarius Cooper's bedroom, we systematically started going through places that things could be hidden.
We were going through it and we weren't finding anything. And then one of my detectives, probably into the 30th box or so, he's like, I got something. And I was like, do what?
When I saw that gun, I immediately felt like we had found the needle in the haystack. We had known through this investigation that most likely we were looking for a very specific gun. That is the same style gun that we're looking for. Same caliber, most likely the same brand, the same model.
At that moment, I was like, Jimmy's here. He's guiding us. He's telling us it's all here. He's not making it easy. He's making this puzzle, but it's slowly coming together. So immediately took the gun and had TBI process it. Within a couple hours, they were calling us back on, hey, this is the gun that was used in the homicide of Jimmy McClain. That does bring some emotion to you. You're like, oh my gosh, this work, this time, and we're going into 30 days here. I mean, nobody finds a gun used in a homicide in 30 days.
Police need to talk to Jamarius, but before they can track him down, they get an alarming call.
We have a call from Cumberland County Sheriff's Office, and the deputy there said, hey, listen, we just had something weird come in. A white female came running into our station. She was very distraught. She was in her pajamas, and that she said that she wanted to pass on some information, that her husband was upset because his nephew had admitted to killing a basketball coach.
Detectives investigating the murder of Jimmy McClain have just received an unexpected call from a sheriff's office 5 hours away.
And the deputy there said a white female came running into our station. Her husband was upset because his nephew had admitted to killing a basketball coach. Her husband was Carla's brother, which was Dwayne's uncle.
Detectives are stunned. Dwayne's uncle is Donald Page, a known felon. Detectives bring him in, knowing they may only have one shot to get him to talk.
He was I'm not talking to y'all, I ain't got nothing to say.
Police remind him of one simple fact. If he's withholding information, that makes him an accessory to murder.
And all of a sudden, he said, look, my nephew said he did it.
Dwayne had, in fact, taken him aside and said, Uncle, had to handle my business. And Donald said he looked at him and said, are you saying that you killed him? Dwayne said to him, I had to stand up for my mom.
Dwayne, he loved his mom. They were having some financial issues, and Dwayne thought that if this divorce could just be done with, I could get the money from the house. And I think Dwayne took it upon himself to do whatever he wanted to do, and which unfortunately led to the homicide.
There was tension between Jimmy and Dwayne already. So there was that divorce, money, financial implication, motive.
With an accessory charge hanging over his head, Donald agrees to testify against his nephew.
At that point, I called the prosecutor and told him what we had, and he said, I think it's time to go lock up Dwayne Moore for homicide.
On March 26, 2013, Dwayne Moore is charged with the murder of his own stepfather.
I'm telling you, he just had no remorse, no confessions. He just didn't have any care in the world whatsoever.
When I heard Dwayne had been charged with Jimmy's murder, I felt a lot of relief.
I was shocked to know that someone that he had influenced this long in this young man's life that would take his life.
It went deep to my core as far as emotionally. This was unbelievable because of who Jimmy was.
14 months later, Dwayne Moore stands before the Memphis judge and jury. The prosecution lays out what they believe happened the night of the murder.
Dwayne had it in his head that he was going over there to kill him. He knew that there was a key to the house that Carla might have forgot about. I think he waited until he saw Jimmy pull in, let himself in that front door. Pulled the gun out as soon as he saw Jimmy and started shooting. I think he did it in about 5 minutes at the most. I think he just went in there and started blasting away.
To try to imagine what Jimmy must have gone through in the final moments that he was living is extremely painful. The awful terror he must have felt, knowing that his life was about to end.
On June 27, 2014, Dwayne Moore is convicted and sentenced to 22 years in prison without the possibility of parole.
It hurts. It hurts that somebody thought so little of my family, that they could take somebody so precious to us.
While Jimmy's family still misses him every day, his love for educating young people lives on.
To honor Jimmy's memory, we established a scholarship in his name at the University of Arkansas at Conway.
I think Jimmy will want to be remembered by being a godly man, a kind man, and a peaceful man.
That's what helps me to try to let the anger go. Don't be mad. Just thank God that he was here and that he was my brother for as long as he was. I miss him and I love him.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to oxygen.com.
For the Cook family of Georgetown, Texas, Thursday, January 10th, 2002, begins like any other day. Robert, a software engineer, his wife Janet, an art teacher, and their youngest daughter Joanne, a high school student, eat breakfast and share plans. The only thing a little out of the ordinary this morning is the presence of the family's eldest daughter, Rachel, who is sprawled out asleep on a nearby couch. Rachel is visiting on her winter break from a college in San Diego.
She was sleeping on her couch while she was in town for my cousin's wedding.
Rachel has extended her stay in Texas to attend the wedding and has been driving her family crazy, asking them which of the many outfits she has brought home she should wear.
She couldn't decide, and she was asking everybody's opinion on which one. Of course, she'd end up using the one she wanted anyway, but she always asked.
She was very into fashion. My sister was kind of a fashionista in her own way. She loved shopping. It was one of her very favorite things to do.
On Christmas Day, she'd worn a new tan sweater with beaded trim.
She was like, yeah, this is my new sweater. I got it, it was $400, and my mouth just dropped open. I couldn't believe it, but that's kind of how she was.
We were supposed to go out that Thursday night, and we were so excited because I hadn't seen her in so long.
Shannon Leach hasn't seen much of her best friend since Rachel moved to California, but their relationship goes back a long way.
Rachel and I met probably, I think we were about 5 years old, and she was just one of those people you love to be around. She was funny and beautiful, just such a good person.
Rachel brought her new boyfriend home with her, but by New Year's, he'd already returned to California.
She told me how happy and in love with him that she was. And they seemed to get along really well, and she seemed very happy.
He was a super guy. He was very attentive to her, very sympathetic to her desires about her future, her dreams.
My sister told me that she really thought Greg was the one. She told me that she wanted to, eventually get engaged.
Rachel is planning to move in with Greg and enroll in a fashion design program once she returns.
I think she would have been very successful because she always had her own style on things. She was just always looked beautiful in whatever she did because she could create these outfits that nobody else could get away with, and it would just look amazing on her.
When she was 18, Rachel brought her fashion sense to the Miss Georgetown contest. She didn't win, but that didn't faze her.
Rachel normally wasn't into pageantry type things, but she decided her senior year that she was going to take part in that. And I think she really enjoyed the experience. As to winning, I don't think that was her real goal. I think it was just to take part.
She's very beautiful, and so men were always attracted to her. She was just one of those people that you wanted to be around all the time.
She just loved life, and she never could get enough done in a day. She had her whole life to do things.
On that Thursday morning, Rachel's father, Robert, leaves first. Her sister and mother say their goodbyes around 8 a.m. and head for school.
I walked over and told her goodbye, and she just kind of mumbled. So we said, "Good morning, goodbye," and we left for work.
Around an hour later, Rachel is awakened by a cell phone call from her boyfriend in San Diego. She tells him she is going to get up and go for her daily run in the neighborhood. Rachel says she misses him and will call him when she returns home after her jog.
She'd run 4 or 6 miles every day, so that was a good workout for her. It kept her in shape.
Athletic since childhood, Rachel has been an avid runner for most of her life.
She started running in elementary school, and she suddenly realized that she was beating almost all the boys, and she decided she wanted to do that, and she did long-distance track and cross-country.
Sometime after her phone call with her boyfriend ends, Rachel puts on her running clothes, grabs a portable radio and earphones, and goes out for her run. Her parents' ranch-style house is in a subdivision of Georgetown, Texas, a little north of Austin. Most homes sit on large lots of more than an acre and are set back from the road. On a workday, there isn't much traffic by foot or by car as Rachel jogs her usual route. She has been running here since she was a child.
She loved it out there, and I think she, in a way, missed it. She loved the excitement of California, but home's always home, too.
Hours later, when her family returns, Rachel is not home. And from the looks of things, she's never returned from her run at all. Coming up, surprise at Rachel's sudden disappearance turns to shock and then horror.
I knew something was terribly, terribly, terribly wrong.
Rachel was a hometown girl. She grew up here. She was raised here. Everybody knew her. And to our knowledge, and most of the agencies around here, there's never been a case.
"19-year-old Rachel Cook has gone out for her customary 6-mile run. Hours later, her father returns home and finds several of his daughter's dresses and shoes lined up in the living room. But Rachel isn't there. Her father notices that Rachel's cell phone is still at the house, as is her purse. Wondering where she could have gone without them, Robert calls Rachel's longtime friend, Shannon Leach.
He had asked me if I had talked to her, and I had said no, but we were planning on going out later, and he told me that she was gone, but that none of her stuff was gone. And everybody that knew Rachel knew she didn't go anywhere without her personal belongings, especially her makeup. So right then when he told me that, I started to get really worried.
Rachel's family is concerned too. Her mother phones Wildfire, a restaurant where Rachel sometimes works when she's in town.
They said she worked that night. So we thought, well, maybe she caught a ride to there and she was filling in for someone and she forgot to take her purse and her cell phone and she'd be coming home any time.
But by morning, Rachel has not returned. Another call to the restaurant uncovers a mix-up. It was a different Rachel, not Rachel Cook, who had worked the night before. Now even more alarmed, her family surveys Rachel's extensive wardrobe and discovers that only her jogging outfit and running shoes are missing.
I knew something was terribly, terribly, terribly wrong. And all evidence looked like she'd gone out for a run and had not come home.
I decided that I was going to go out and drive Rachel's jogging path. I drove that really slow, looking to see maybe she got hit by a car and might have been laying on the side.
Janet Cook checks out the local hospital. It has been more than 24 hours since Rachel went out for her run and disappeared. Neither parent finds any sign of their daughter. As if in a dream, they head to the sheriff's office to report Rachel missing.
We received a report on January the 11th, 2002, from Robert and Janet Cook that their daughter Rachel Cook was missing. She had been unaccounted for already a day. Rachel was a hometown girl. She grew up here. She was raised here. Everybody knew her. To our knowledge, and most of the agencies around here, there's never been a case like this.
Georgetown is a classically quaint, old Texas town, surrounded by quiet residential neighborhoods and cattle ranches. Abductions were unheard of until Rachel Cook disappeared.
Nothing happens here. It's a small town. Everybody's friendly. You don't think that something like that could happen to you.
Her parents have been uneasy about Rachel living in the much larger city of San Diego, where she moved after high school.
We were worried about her in San Diego. We thought that they'd have a high crime rate. It never occurred to us that it would happen when she was at home.
Nothing ever happened to her there, and she comes home, and home's supposed to be safe, and it wasn't.
At first, Rachel's family believes the authorities are slow to respond to their missing person report.
I felt like the police didn't take it seriously enough, a little bit inclined to say, it's probably nothing, things like that don't happen here. She was a young girl, she probably just went out to go party and didn't tell people, because for the most part, that's what happens in Georgetown.
You said that she was off in Mexico, probably with her boyfriend, and that she'd be home any minute. And that was kind of discouraging.
We lost some valuable time because in an abduction, the first 48, 72 hours, that's your window right there. And we lost it.
When the Cooks don't hear back from police on Friday, they organize a search by friends and family for Saturday morning. When an investigator finally appears around noon on Saturday, he stops the search.
They were, I think, kind of astounded at how many people were out there. But I think they were also freaking out because there were people just tromping around on what might be a crime scene.
The next day, an investigator from the legendary Texas Rangers joins the investigation.
I was contacted by the Williamson County Sheriff's Office on January the 13th of 2002. Pretty early on in the investigation, it was determined that it would be unlike Rachel's behavior just to go off and not tell anyone where she was, so it created suspicion.
And he told me he didn't think Rachel left on her own, so that made me feel a little bit more like I finally got to the right person. And so they started approaching it more like there was a problem.
all-out official search involving volunteers and several agencies begins on Sunday, 4 days after Rachel vanishes.
We utilized everything we had: ATVs, horseback, helicopters, massive search parties. Brought in a search team called EquiSearch to help do the search with us, so we'd have more manpower. Anywhere Rachel was known to have gone when she was at home, that area was searched.
But the searchers turn up nothing.
No sign of Rachel Cook or any of the clothing that she was possibly wearing.
Detectives struggle to set up a timeline of Rachel's last known movements. She was last seen by her mother and sister around 8 a.m. on Thursday. Cell phone records confirm her last phone call was with her boyfriend in California, ending at 9:15 a.m. When police canvassed the neighborhood, it turns out a number of neighbors caught sight of Rachel as she was jogging later that Thursday morning.
Two separate couples, they identified her and they described her clothing and her hair, and we believe that to be Rachel.
It was after 10 a.m. on Thursday when Rachel passed one couple out for their daily walk as she did her circuit around the neighborhood. Around 20 minutes later, she passed them again. A woman working in her yard with her daughter tells investigators she saw Rachel as she ran to the end of their cul-de-sac and did some stretches. The two exchange greetings, and Rachel continues on her run.
The last known sighting of Rachel Cook was a couple that actually knew the family, and around 10:45 they were pulling out of their driveway, and Rachel had run behind the vehicle. They had looked at her and did recognize that it was her running, and they saw her going towards her house. Their residence was about 200 yards from her residence, so they assumed that she was going home.
After that, Rachel Cook disappears as if into thin air.
There's no evidence that she actually arrived at the house.
So assumptions were that she was abducted during that jog from the neighborhood in which she lived.
It is an assumption that leaves little to go on and is of no comfort to her family. As the days go by with no sign of Rachel, her parents are devastated.
They were a wreck. They were both in tears, just not knowing what was going on and what had happened to Rachel.
Rachel's disappearance is a baffling mystery, a probable crime without a crime scene to investigate.
You have a person who basically vanished. We have absolutely no evidence of a crime scene at all. There's no evidence on the road, there's no evidence in the house, there's no evidence anywhere that anything even happened to her.
Coming up, Rachel's father takes a lie detector test.
I actually failed one question. They asked me if I knew where Rachel was, and I said,
Rachel Cook's disappearance shocks Central Texas. The official search ends after several days, but hundreds of volunteers helped the Cooks continue to look for their daughter for weeks.
When they'd come back, they'd feel so disappointed because they had not found her. They'd be in tears and very emotional about it.
Mounted search and recovery teams from Texas EquiSearch comb hundreds of square miles for evidence.
They turned in everything that was semi-suspicious to the sheriff's department.
I'd look around and think, oh my God, Rachel, look at all these people that care for you, baby. It just tore me up that so many people would come together for her.
Media attention brings a record number of tips to police.
There were hundreds of leads, if not thousands.
I have interviewed probably in the triple digits people that we have as a suspect or just a witness on this case.
Early on, investigators develop a lead. A suspicious car was seen by many in the neighborhood the day Rachel disappeared.
A white Camaro was seen in the area. We actually lost count of how many reports we had of white Camaros come into the tip line.
Witnesses report two young men in a white Camaro aimlessly circling the neighborhood. One report mentions a jogger in Rachel's age range near the Camaro. Another suggests a young woman possibly struggling in the car.
Investigators worked really hard to locate that particular car. Several were located and examined, but no evidence was found that actually linked Rachel to those particular vehicles.
Finally, the lead about the two young men in the Camaro comes to a dead end. It turns out to be a couple of teenagers playing hooky.
They admitted to us what they were doing in the area. Background search was completed on both of them. There was no evidence in their vehicle that we needed as far as DNA evidence or anything, and they were excluded as suspects in this case.
The Camaro isn't the only vehicle of interest. Sheriff's Department divers suit up and search the murky waters of Lake Georgetown, just a couple of miles down the road from the Cook home.
We had reports such as vehicles submerged here in the Lake Georgetown, and those were recovered from the lake and deemed to have been stolen earlier before her disappearance, so they were not related, so that was ruled out.
Composite sketches of unidentified males seen in the area are drawn up by police artists and distributed to the public.
Those, of course, went through the media, and no real good tips on those as far as who they might look like or anything such as that.
In addition to suspicious strangers, detectives examine people closer to home. Rachel's boyfriend, Greg, who flies back on Sunday to help with the search, is questioned as soon as he arrives.
Initially, I was involved in interviewing a present boyfriend of Rachel's from California.
Greg is given a lie detector test, even though phone records confirm that his call to Rachel the morning she disappeared was made from San Diego.
We were able to pretty much rule the gentleman out early in the investigation and continue our focus on other people.
Both of Rachel's parents also volunteered to take lie detector tests. Robert fails a question on his.
They asked me if I knew where Rachel was. I said no, and unfortunately, I think I do. I think she's in heaven. So I think that's why I didn't pass that one question on the quiz.
You start ruling out those people close to her. They were able to clear some people. Some still remain people of interest.
One of Rachel's ex-boyfriends becomes a person of interest. Her sister Joanne's suspicions center on him.
My sister had mentioned that she had seen her ex-boyfriend, and she didn't go into detail with me, but she had mentioned that he made a scene. My intuition tells me that it's not unreasonable to think that he could have had a fight with her and something happened.
Many of Rachel's friends and family members say they considered her relationship with the ex-boyfriend to be volatile.
Their relationship was really kind of like fire and ice from the get-go.
Rachel's mother says the young man was very upset after Rachel broke off their relationship.
And when she came home the next time for the holiday, he came over and he was inebriated. And he came, it must have been 3 o'clock at night, pounding on the door wanting to see Rachel. So I had to threaten him because he just would not leave. I threatened to call the sheriff's department.
He still wanted to be a part of her life, and she didn't want to have anything to do with him.
They had been at a party a couple nights before, and people heard him arguing, and he was yelling at her and telling her that he couldn't live without her, and he wanted to be with her again and that she needed to be with him. This was 2 days before she disappeared.
Police investigate, but the man denies any involvement in Rachel's disappearance.
I just don't know. Ex-boyfriends, ex-husbands are always someone you have to look at, but when you don't have any proof, then you can't really call them a suspect.
The months go by. Despite all the efforts to solve the mystery, the first anniversary of Rachel's disappearance arrives, with authorities seemingly no closer to finding out what happened to Rachel Cook than they were at the outset. The family begins to lose hope.
I started thinking about all of the things that she was going to miss, that I was still going to get to do.
Being the parent of a missing person, or being a relative of a missing person. There's a thing we say that it's one of the biggest clubs in the world. And it's one club you never want to join.
Coming up, after years without a break in the Rachel Cook case, the investigation heats up when a convicted murderer reveals he has something to say.
He advised us that he killed Rachel Cook and named locations that he had taken her.
An exhaustive investigation fails to solve the mystery of Rachel Cook's disappearance. A year later, there are lots of theories about what may have happened to Rachel, but no evidence.
There's really no telling how it came down after she passed that driveway. Somebody was driving by and took an opportunity. It could be a possibility that someone was laying in wait for her. It would not have been easy for her to hear someone coming up on her.
I suspect that it happened either in the last part of her jog or else as soon as she walked into the house, because we never locked our house. We felt safe in that country area.
The case goes cold and becomes officially inactive. For the Cooks, the stress of Rachel's loss leads to additional family crises.
My sister's disappearance definitely changed my family. I think we each deal in our own way. And in a way that kind of got in between some of us.
Robert and I weren't communicating. When it came to Rachel's stuff, we were together. We were going to do what we needed to do for our baby. But his and mine's personal relationship it just wasn't there anymore.
She wanted hugs, she wanted comfort, whereas my dad wanted to make sure it doesn't happen again. And then he also was kind of our liaison for the media and making sure the word got out.
It was very difficult on us because when you have a missing loved one, that comes to be like a second job. I ended up getting laid off. Janet and I were divorced, and just psychologically, it's always there. You wake up to it every day.
I asked for a divorce because I was just trying to keep myself alive. I mean, I had depression like you wouldn't believe. And I was seeing a psychiatrist, and I was on major meds.
And me, I tried to go on with life as much as I could, as much as normal.
Then, 2 years after Rachel disappears, there is fresh interest in the case when a new sheriff pulls together a Rachel Cook task force made up of sheriff's detectives, Texas Rangers, FBI, and the Austin Cold Case Unit.
And they thought they were really going to find Rachel. They tried for a long time and still did not come up with a lot that hadn't been found before.
In 2006, Detective Larry Hawkins is assigned, and when the task force is disbanded, he inherits its files, which take up 6 shelves and several file cabinets in his office. The father of 3 daughters, he is determined to solve the case.
A lot of police officers are looked at, we don't have a heart, and we're all about business, but Rachel Cook is someone's daughter. And for those of us who have kids, it kind of hits home.
Then, in August of 2006, investigators get what looks like a clear breakthrough in the case. From prison, a convicted murderer contacts authorities with a stunning story.
A gentleman named Michael Moore, who was the subject of an unrelated homicide investigation, told investigators that he was responsible for the disappearance of Rachel Cook.
Michael Moore is a career criminal who has been in and out of trouble since the age of 13. Moore has spent much of his adult life in prison. At the time of his confession to law officers, he is serving 4 life sentences for the 2003 robbery and murder of a young mother and her unborn child in a town neighboring Georgetown.
Michael Moore is a very interesting individual. He does have a history of murder. He has a history of a lot of things that would make him be a good suspect for this case.
Both Detective Hawkins and Texas Ranger Lindeman, among others, interview Moore in prison. He tells them he was driving around the neighborhood looking for someone to rob when he saw Rachel.
He advised us that he killed Rachel Cook and named locations that he had taken her.
He came forward and confessed that he had taken Rachel and dumped her body in Matagorda Bay, which is on the Gulf Coast of Texas.
Moore offers investigators a chilling, detailed account of what he had done to Rachel and how he had accosted her on the road.
And he stopped when she was jogging on the road and killed her with a hammer. That was all hard to hear.
The story is plausible. Moore was out of prison at the time of Rachel's disappearance and lived not far from her parents' house. After Rachel disappeared, a white pickup truck became a vehicle of interest. Moore was said to have driven a white pickup at the time. Rachel's mother remembers seeing such a vehicle near her house.
There is a white pickup truck that was in the area. And I think it was the first night after we went to the police, before the police were involved in the search, it cruised real slowly by the house.
Investigators continue to spend time talking with Moore. They believe they are starting to build a solid case.
Investigators interrogated him extensively, even taking him to locations where he had claimed to have disposed of her body.
Divers search a location Moore takes them to in Matagorda Bay, but they find nothing. Still, he and his attorneys work out a deal for Moore to plead guilty to the murder of Rachel Cook. In return for helping investigators, Moore is to get only an additional 18 months on his existing sentence. The Cooks hope for some kind of closure. Finally, an end to their long ordeal is in sight. They gather their family and friends and go to the courthouse for Michael Moore's plea hearing.
It was a really big deal for me and my family that we might get some sort of resolution. So people canceled everything they had going on in their lives to make it up here for that.
And we went in there and I saw Moore for the first time in person, sitting there with his lawyers.
Coming up, a shocking event at the courthouse shatters Rachel's family.
He is a predator. He lives and breathes based on taking advantage of other people. And he used my daughter for his own gain. That's why he did.
November 9th, 2006. For 4 years, Rachel Cook's family has been waiting and hoping for this day. A convicted murderer, Michael Moore, says he is finally going to tell them what happened to their daughter.
The day that Mr. Moore was going to enter his plea of guilty, there was a lot of interest generated because there had been so much extensive news coverage of Rachel's disappearance, and now it came down to the day that somebody was going to admit that they were the cause of her disappearance.
There was tons of reporters. The courtroom was absolutely full. It was almost like you see on TV. It just seemed very surreal.
The courtroom was packed with people, and Mr. Moore stood there to enter his plea.
Calls number 06-18-23-K-368, State versus Michael Keith Moore. People charged of murder is alleged. How do you plead? Not guilty. Repeat that for me. Not guilty.
And then he got up there and he said not guilty. And it was kind of a hush just fell over the entire crowd. Nobody knew what to do. He had been feeding the information that he had done it and said that he had done it. And then out of nowhere, he just decides that he is going to take it back.
Which was contrary to what he had been telling investigators and the prosecutor's office that he was going to do.
Moore's turnabout creates an uproar, even surprising his lawyers. But he sticks to his not guilty plea, and the hearing is dismissed. The Cook family voices outrage. They feel victimized all over again.
Come forward and be a man for once in your life and tell the truth.
Moore later tells a reporter that he made the whole story up.
He is a predator. He lives and breathes based on taking advantage of other people. And he used my daughter for his own gain. That's why he did everything.
I was livid. I thought that whether or not he had done it, the fact that he would put my family through that we would all come there hoping to get some kind of answers. And then he just throws it back in our face and says he doesn't care about anything.
The DA announces he will pursue a murder charge against Moore, but a grand jury is never called. Without Moore's cooperation, there is no case.
We were not able to speak to him anymore after that. He did sign paperwork, but it was not finalized by a judge as far as prosecuting him on it. There's no evidence that he actually did what he said he did.
Personally, that was the first time that I had had anyone own up to or claim to have done such a thing and then at the last minute back out on those claims.
He's still a very strong person of interest.
Investigators have not been idle in the years since Michael Moore changed his plea. Acting on tips, Williamson County divers have searched Georgetown Lake at least 4 times, but they haven't found any trace of Rachel. Detective Larry Hawkins and Texas Ranger Matt Lindeman continue to work leads, hoping for a breakthrough.
You have to eliminate everything because one day you're going to have a legitimate tip. We have some tips of interest that we're looking at right now.
Some of those tips lead investigators to excavate portions of a property in Williamson County. Detective Hawkins uses ground-penetrating radar probes to look for disturbed soil and other indications someone may be buried at a location.
For the last 3 years, we get a continuous tip, as I call it, that Rachel is on a certain property. We've had multiple searches out there. It's just a continuous story that we hear with a little twist each time. It comes back to the same people every time. We're going to keep looking at it. It's a very large piece of property, and we're hopeful.
Rachel's family members go forward with their lives, but the pain and doubt are always there for them.
I would really love to know what happened, why it happened, why. Rachel was such a giving soul and such a friendly soul.
Janet Cook lives alone, surrounded by her art, including a portrait of Rachel. She still teaches art to students at Georgetown High School, Rachel's alma mater. Her dog is a rescue from Hurricane Katrina. Janet built the koi pond and waterfall by herself. The sound of falling water helps give her peace from the questions that echo in her mind.
Was it an accident? Was it on purpose? I don't know.
Janet is unsure if Michael Moore is responsible for her daughter's disappearance, but she would like to find out.
If he did have anything to do with it, directly or indirectly, for the love of God and the saving of his soul, please come forward. Would he do that for me? Would he do that for himself?
In January of 2011, Michael Moore agrees to be interviewed about Rachel Cook for this program at the state prison in Gatesville, Texas. The camera is set up in the prison chapel, but when he appears, he says he has changed his mind, just as he did that day in court in 2006. Rachel's family doesn't know what to make of Moore's infuriating and cryptic behavior. At times, they think he may have had a hand in Rachel's disappearance, but more often, they think he is simply manipulating them.
He could have murdered Rachel. I'm not going to say anything. He lived not too far from us, so he could have done it. But I just had this feeling that he was just taking advantage of us.
Robert Cook keeps a small house in the Georgetown area where his daughter Joanne lives while getting a master's degree in social work at the University of Texas in Austin.
My sister's disappearance kind of solidified for me that I wanted to be in a profession where I'm involved with people. And I also want to make sure that anybody who's having any issues in their own life has somebody to talk to so that they don't feel tempted to do what whoever took my sister did.
Finding Rachel has been Robert's first priority since the day she disappeared, and the years have taken a heavy toll on him.
You feel guilty. You know, it's that you're not doing more, but there's just so much you can do as a private person. Without a lot of resources, you just can't do a lot.
He had made Rachel a promise that he was not going to quit until he found her. And he took that very, very, very seriously, and he still does. And at this point in his life, you know, not having found her, I think it's really chewing on him.
Investigators say they will never give up on a case that still haunts Georgetown, Texas. Rachel's image has shone down from billboards here, and a ceremony takes place each year on the anniversary of her disappearance at a memorial tree planted at her high school.
It is important to me that it be solved for the Cook family and for the community.
I believe that someone out there knows exactly what happened to Rachel Cook. Hopefully they will really think about it after watching this and realize that it's someone's child, that it's someone's sister, someone's grandchild, and there's a lot of devastated people out there.
It's possible somebody might have abducted her and just have her locked up somewhere. So what I would like is answers, just to know. I mean, even if that means we know she's dead.
It's a horrible thing to not know what happened, and I think it's even worse